Oh, wow. Wow. I mean, I saw the line out there, but I didn't see all y'all out there. This is incredible. Thank you all very much for being here. Hi, and welcome to this exclusive Clips in Conversation with George C. Wolfe about the making of Rustin. So tonight we're going to see some never-before-seen clips from this film that tells the story of Bayard Rustin, the man behind the March on Washington, which celebrates its 60th anniversary later this month. Now, y'all are here for this, as I said, exclusive Clips and Conversation, but you should know that Rustin releases in select theaters on November 3rd, and then on Netflix on November 17th. But as I said, you all will be getting a special early look at the film starring Coleman Domingo tonight. I would like to say that for myself, but for all of us here, we are honored to be here to have this conversation in this room. Thank you to Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival for having us. Special thank you to our producers, Higher Ground Productions, Bruce Cohen and Tanya Davis, who are here with us today. Is that you, Emil? Yeah. Oh, Emil Wilbekin. Sorry, I haven't seen Emil in person in a long time, my bad. All right, let's get going. Let's welcome to the stage the producer and acclaimed director of Rustin, DGA award recipient, 5-time Tony Award winner, George C. Wolfe.
I need to go home now. Okay.
5-time Tony Award winner. And Tonys are for theater, as everybody here knows. Yeah. But we're here talking about a movie. What's the difference between directing for the stage and directing for film?
I don't think of it that way. I mean, I think either you choose a story, but I think more often than not, stories choose you. And then your craft is in service of telling that story. So I call myself a director because I am a director, but I really think of myself more as a storyteller. And so that drives that. And then I remember when I did Lackawanna Blues, which was my first film, and thank you. And then at one point, I was shooting this scene with young Ruben and this guitar player, and I was looking at the shot, and there was a glass of lemonade just sitting on the table between them, and I went, that should be iced tea. And then I heard people go, it should be iced tea, it should be iced tea, it should be iced tea, it should be iced tea. And then 3 seconds later, there was a glass of iced tea. I went, oh, I like this stuff, okay. So I like the efficiency of it and the quickness of it, but also the fact that something which I deeply, deeply believe that when you are telling a story, every single detail either enhances the telling of the story or distracts from telling the story. And the guy who was the guitar player, he was blind and his eyes were turned upward, and somehow the darkness of the lemonade pulled you into the beauty of his eyes. Just a little bit more. It was a stupid little thing. Nobody would know it, but it was just something that clicked into my brain. And so it just magnified that phenomenon that what you say, what you do, what you add to matters. Every single thing matters. Everything matters. What you say to an actor, what you say to anybody, what you say matters deeply, deeply, deeply. And the camera captures it in a way that the theater does as well.
After that big setup, let's show the opening moments of Rustin. And that's just the first 7 minutes and 22 seconds of the movie. So you know what you're in store for. So, George.
Yes.
I had as much fun rewatching that as watching you watch this opening sequence. Primarily because not only did you direct this movie, you mouthed all the words.
Oh, yeah.
Martin Luther King, Bayard, Roy Wilkins, Chris Rock, it was fantastic. This is personal. This isn't just some film, some project. This is personal for you. I would love for you to talk about why this is so personal for you.
Okay, but I mouth it because it's part of, it's like, this is definitely comes from the theater because the play is happening and I have no control while it's happening. And sometimes I will sit there and I will mouth the words and as if to try to make the actors do invisibly what they're supposed to do in the scene. I remember one time it was Top Dog Underdog, and I came backstage afterwards, and Jeffrey Wright said to me, I guess we were bad tonight. He said, why'd you say it? He said, because I saw you at the back of the theater going. But this is personal to me simply because Bayard I'm not very good with present and past tense because when they're that powerful, they're ever present for me. Because this remarkable human being, a brilliant, his organizational skills, his command. He was a teacher. He was impassioned. He was ferocious. He was very funny. He was a tenor. He sang on Broadway in a Paul Robeson show that lasted 5 performances and then it closed. But he was on Broadway there. He was singing. He was an athlete when he was in high school. He was from Westchester, Pennsylvania, and the town was segregated, and he led boycotts of the YMCA and all these things. And then he was a star athlete, and when he went to his coach and said, unless the black boys get to stay in the same accommodations as the white boys, we're not going to play. I mean, he's 16, 17 years old doing this. So this was a man whose ferocity and sense of justice and correctness was like, it seemed to be embedded in every fiber of his being. And then history frequently does, it forgot him. It, point of fact, erased him. And some will argue that it was an aggressive, let's forget. But also at the same time, at the end of the March on Washington, to allow a little bit of grace in there, a superstar was Martin Luther King. After that speech, he was lifted into the stratosphere. So that contributed to that. But for somebody who was this phenomenal, who staged this march with this group of kids, and I do mean 19, 20, 21, 22, in 7 weeks, without cell phones and texting each other and showing a picture of yourself at the Washington Monument, here we are working, none of that was going on. That was a little bit hostile, forgive me. And just did this phenomenal thing and was passionate and dedicated, and he belongs center stage of his own film. He just does.
In fact, you called him, you've described him as, quote, the ultimate American. Talk more about that.
Well, my definition of ultimate American is somebody who does service, who is of service, someone who has an expansive curiosity, because we live in a country of all different kinds of people. So if you are actually curious about somebody, you will lean in and wanting to know them, as opposed to allowing your fear to dictate your response to them. And the other thing is that he felt this, and I think we all have a responsibility to do something, whatever it is, for those who are in need. And I think, and he embodied that. And so to me, if that's a goal for what American be, there's a whole bunch of other definitions that may work for other people. That one doesn't work for me. But that, to me, is what makes him the ultimate American.
And a moment ago in describing him, you said he was aggressive in terms of his intellect, in terms of his prowess and his talent. The one thing I'll never forget, the day he died, and this was when I think I was an intern at NBC News at the time, and I watched the nightly news that night, and they read his obituary, and they said, and describing his qualities, including the organizer of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the anchor said he was he was an avowed homosexual, which in the 80s was like, wait, what? But we're talking about a man who lived out loud and proud before we were saying, we were out loud and proud in the 50s and the 60s. I guess my question is, why? Why was he so comfortable and confident in his own skin when the entire world told him, don't talk about that, don't show that, don't be that?
Well, I think I think the fact that he was a Quaker which is, I know, he's like, black gay Quaker, okay, let's go with that. But I think that had something to do, it's in the film where he says, he told his grandmother, who primarily raised him, in essence, and I'm going to screw up the line, even though I know all the damn lines, but I'm going to screw it up. First she said, what would you have me do with that? And then she said the equivalent of, if that's what you must be. And I think that was very, I think that, and so I think he had already given himself permission to be who he was, and then her saying that, well, if that's what you must be. And I think it just emboldened him, and I think he felt this incredible sense of responsibility and was so busy doing what he was doing that I don't think he could be distracted by playing out somebody else's definition of that he should be ashamed of it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He was too busy working. He was too busy, going to India and studying the teachings of Gandhi and then coming back and sharing those with Martin Luther King. He was too busy doing other things to bother with being an ashamed homosexual. Mm-hmm. And I also think that that not being imprisoned inside of that Southern black church thing, I was raised a Baptist, yes, thank you, but without working out all of that stuff, he didn't have to work his way through it. There's a character, that's a fictional character in there who embodies a lot of him trying to work through that. So I just think I think there was I don't know, there may have been some spiritual reason for why he was like that. I just think there was a sense of efficiency. It was like, okay, how many toilets do we need for the March on Washington? Do I have time to be ashamed of homosexual? No. All right, so let's go on.
Right. I'm glad you brought up the fictional character Elias. He's the Southern Christian field organizer that Bayard meets in that meeting that we just showed. Talk about what he represents. Well, I mean, you're talking about him now, but the thing I loved this movie.
Excuse me, I didn't hear that. Your microphone went out. I'm sorry.
I loved this movie, George. But what I loved about this movie, y'all got to see one part of why I love this movie, and that was Adam Clayton Powell and Roy Wilkins talking smack, and not, prettified language that we, hear from some of these movies. No, they were cussing and they were talking about a lot of stuff. You made them real. And in this movie, we see, at least I believe we see, a 360-degree view of Bayard Rustin. Not just the man who organized the March on Washington, but the man who, as you say, he was busy organizing, but we see him busy living. Yeah. He's not hiding his life as a gay man. Why was it important to show all of Bayard Rustin?
Well, because I think all art is there to empower. It's there to empower people. Whereas Bayard was an extraordinary man, I'm really incredibly fascinated when ordinary people do extraordinary things, like Claudette Colvin or Ruby Doris, or any of these people who are just exactly like all of us. And we have monuments, and they're very important, and we go to them and we look at them in awe. And then we have art, and art is not a monument. Art, it's wonderful to see people struggling with the awkward foolish, magnificent, wonderful thing that it means to be a human being, which means you succeed, you fail, you say stupid stuff, you've got to backtrack, figure out how to get somebody to forgive you. All of those things, it's how we grow and become a better version of ourselves. And you see that in the film, and that's why we go to the theater. It's why we go to see films. We get to see our fragile existence made majestic. That's why we go to see those things. Or sometimes we see that majesty fail. But it makes them real, and it makes us believe that we are capable of magical, possible things. So just to see perfect Bayard is not interesting. It's not fun to direct or act. You know, they don't give Academy Awards to people going, I'm perfect. They give Academy Awards to people going, I'm falling apart. Oh, I'm together now. Give me the award. You know, it's the process of figuring out how to be a better version of ourselves that makes for a really, really interesting art. And he's so perfect because he's so ferociously committed, and then he makes smart decisions, then he makes foolish decisions, and we all do that, and that's what it's about. It's about you know, it's a very interesting thing to me, because now you brought up theater versus film. It's so interesting to me is when a film is working really well, we tend to lean back in our seats because the figures are so much bigger than us. They're mythic. In the theater, when it's working really well, we tend to lean forward, because it's the same proportion of ourselves. So a lot of times how I use the camera, and when I use the camera, is to make it feel like you're in the room. You're not this distant observer, but you are, you know, there's a scene where there's a party that he goes to after he's been outed from the civil rights movement. And I want the audience to feel like they're there in that party in 1963, when all these fractions, when SNCC and CORE and all these, and the NAACP and all these kids are starting to go to war with each other. So because I want that intimacy, I want you to be inside, so you were seeing the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty, the courage, all that stuff mixed in together.
There's so much in that answer that you just gave. I don't even know where to go. It's so rich. So here's what we're going to do. I want to go to the second clip, because you want to bring people in the room.
Yes.
Well, let's take people literally inside Bayard Rustin's living room. Watch this. So showing that clip is a great segue into talking more fully about the man who plays Bayard Rustin, and that is Coleman Domingo, which this is his first leading role in a film. He was in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which you also directed. Why did you think? Yes, let's give George his props on that. Why did you think Coleman was the right person to play Bayard Rustin?
Well, it was sort of an evolutionary process. At one point it was like, when I was, I'd be talking to, the costume designer. I mean, it happened before this, but I'm just using it as an example. I was talking to somebody, and I go, oh, Coleman would be really interesting in this thing. Anyway, but and then, oh, Coleman should, and I thought, oh, who'd be really great there? Oh, Coleman, oh, he's got a lot of hair, so Coleman, and then still, it kept on happening until I went, oh, Coleman doing this role. I said, okay, I just said it to myself, because his face just kept on popping up. Now, he may have been doing something to make me do that, but but it's perfect. He's got there's an incredible sense of joy of acting that he has, which translates into Bayard's joy of just being. He has unbelievable charisma. Someone who knew Bayard said that anytime he would walk in the room, heads would go, who's that? And so he has that charisma. His use of language, he worked very hard on capturing the voice and mannerisms. He was a great team player and team leader. So it was just, it was a very brilliant, smart decision, and I'm very smart how brilliant and smart I was to cast him in this role.
Yes, you were brilliant and smart. So I was watching, and I'm so glad you saw the opening of the movie, because within 2 minutes of Coleman playing Bayard, I texted Coleman, and I said, from word one, you've captivated me and made me forget I was watching you. Made me believe for the entirety of the movie that I was watching Bayard Rustin. How did he capture Bayard Rustin's mannerisms, his diction? Because I've only seen maybe snippets of the actual Bayard Rustin. How did Coleman become him?
Well, there's. You have to ask Coleman that.
I know, but I mean, you're the director.
I think that there's footage, that there's documentaries of him. There's an album of his, which is my favorite thing in the world. He recorded. This is a rare, unique, wonderful human being, an odd human being. He recorded an album of Elizabethan songs and negro spirituals. Okay, it's like, let me stage a march and let me record Elizabethan songs and negro spirituals. But it's once again that expansiveness. So you hear the voice, the pitch, because I think Coleman's like a baritone, and I think he's, Bayard was a tenor. I mean, they're technical things that I think he without question did. But it's more so. There's there's also this extraordinary sense, and I think the entire cast captures this. They come forth with this vulnerability, and a certain kind of innocence. Now, innocence doesn't not mean clueless. Innocence means an openness, and a non-cynical, over mechanically controlled existence. I remember when I was growing up, anytime there was a black person on a TV commercial, relatives would call up and say, "Turn on the TV, there's a black person there." And so there was this incredible sense of overly present in the moment. And I think he really brings that, and the whole cast does that. And all those young faces, those young, beautiful faces in their scene, for a lot of them, it's their first film. So it was so, and he was a great leader with them, great leader as a lead actor with them, and a great leader as Bayard with them. And they brought that innocence in. So trying to capture, purity is a very bad word, but a certain kind of purity and responsibility and heart. We had 2 weeks. I always rehearse. I had 2 weeks of rehearsal, and every day before I shoot, I clear the set of everyone, and it's just me and the actors. And we go through and we stage it and we talk, and we've already talked for the 2 weeks prior. And so just trying to make them feel as safe as they possibly can, so that therefore their vulnerability, so that therefore they feel confident and are able to surrender to and be vulnerable and in the moment. Because you can act many things, you can't act vulnerability. You have to embody it. And so whatever one has to do to make them feel safe, with cameras and people touching them and doing all this crap to them, and still keep their hearts and their vulnerability there, that's very, very, very important. And Coleman was very, very helpful in that process, because he was also that way as well.
Was there a difference between directing Coleman as a support player in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and directing Coleman as the lead actor in Rustin? Or is your technique the same?
No, I don't think it's, at one point I was, at one point I was offered, this is an indirect way, at one point I was offered to direct Angels in America, which was 7 hours of theater, and I went, how the hell do you do that? And then a voice in your head said, one scene at a time. One moment at a time. If we get one moment, then we're going to get another moment, then we're going to get another moment, and then we'll keep on doing that until we have it all. And because you can't act the whole movie. It's impossible. It's overwhelming. It will overwhelm you. And then you'll want to protect yourself. And then that vulnerability that I'm talking about will go away. And I think it's very important that it's not that you make it, it's just you break it down. Because in that moment, and it's not really sophisticated thinking, it's just life thinking. Because the moment that Bayard is having a heartbreaking moment, with the guy that he's dating at the time. The next scene, he's talking to the New York City Black Police. And his job as the organizer of this march meant let that vulnerability that you're feeling over there now and take command of this situation now. Oh, and you go to DC and these people are incredibly rude to them and well, you got to take that on now. And then, oh, you're calling up Martin to let him know that this happened and you think there's some funny stuff happening with the power structures of DC around the march. So it doesn't allow you to act the whole thing. You just got that perpetual state of vulnerability and command and toughness or fragility is required as per scene. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. So you talked about the powerful scene that Bayard has with the young guy he was dating. We saw that young guy in that second clip. That was the guy, the white guy, Tom, who basically tried to poo-poo an idea, and he said inspiration is, you're trying to kill inspiration before it's born. And then the young woman says, someone didn't go home last night. That was Tom.
You're giving away a lot up here, yeah.
Well, no, it's right there. They saw it.
I'm only teasing you.
Well, I bring that
You
up.
telling Bayard's dirt. Look at that.
I know, you told his dirt. But I bring this up simply because the actor who plays Tom has also played opposite Coleman in The Fear of Walking Dead. And I'm just wondering, as a director, is it easier to direct actors who have worked together before, or is it easier to direct actors who've never worked together?
I think it varies. I mean, I think in this case, the two of them having worked together and having formed a friendship, because Tom was a very close associate of Bayard's, and they worked together many, many, many times. He was an incredible union organizer. He died of AIDS. He was an extraordinary human being, great writer. And so those bonds are there. But I think it's and Glenn Turman, who was also in Ma Rainey, plays A. Philip Randolph. And so that bond that the two of them formed followed over. So if you can use it, use it. And if you can't use it, get it out of the way. And that's what I think directorially, and it's something that you can mine. If you can mine and it's going to add another texture, then without question use it. But you still, and then they would do. I mean, they would go, Coleman and the kids, I call them the team. They would go out to dinner. They'd hang out. They'd do all this sort of stuff, which was really great and wonderful because it was building that sense of connection and trust. And belief in each other and an ease and a sense of play, and that was very important. But sometimes history helps, and sometimes it can get in the way. But ultimately, the story and the dynamics dictate the behavior, and then it's the responsibility of all of us, myself as director, them as actors, the DP, et cetera, to help tell that story, not another story.
So in that second scene we showed, how many of you noticed that they were talking about surrounding the White House and putting tents on the mall for people to sleep in because there were only so many Negro hotels in Washington D.C. Those were the early kernels of the idea of the March on Washington, which they then refined to the point where Bayard Rustin presents it to what we now call the Big Six, or just the big leaders of the civil rights movement. And in this next clip, we will see the discussion, the presentation of this idea of the March on Washington.
Very lovely segue.
The power of that scene still I watched that before the current Supreme Court term ended. And now to hear the words, counting on the courts to eradicate racial inequity, that's madness. That was in 1963. Yep. And those words are still relevant today. You also saw Elias, the guy we were talking about earlier, the Southern, the field organizer who comes to represent a lot in the film and to Bayard. But now that we have seen all three clips from the movie, talk about your overall technique in shooting this movie. Because there is a difference you hope people notice in how you shot this movie in terms of location.
Well, it's very interesting. Early on in the process, I saw this film that with Sammy Davis Jr. called A Man Called Adam. It's not a great film. It was Cicely Tyson's first film job, but it's shot and it takes place in Manhattan. It was very interesting, and it takes place in Manhattan, and I think he was probably doing Golden Boy on Broadway at the time. So you saw, it was the bright lights, the glaring lights, Times Square and all of this. And then I remember at one point having a conversation with Arthur Gelb, who was the editor of the culture editor of the Times, and he told me that, he said, I remember being in Times Square and seeing black people just standing around, and the policemen would come up with their billy clubs and hit them, slam them from behind on the back of their legs and say, get out of here. He said, so for all as liberal as the North was, that was also Manhattan, that dynamic. And so it became very interesting to me that where are the safe places? Where are the safe places for black people, by and large, in Harlem, who had started at the very beginning of Manhattan, and through a series of choices, primarily running from degrees of violence, ended up in Harlem, and the homosexual culture existed off in the shadows, off in the West Village, over where they would park the trucks, or in Central Park. And so to me, it became a very interesting thing. And interesting enough, we shot this in Pittsburgh, and there was this little alley that I went. I said, I want to put a scene in there on Ma Rainey. I want to put a scene in there. I want to put a scene in there. And there's no scene to go in the alley. He said, I know, but there needs to be a scene in that alley. And then we go back there and we film Rustin there. And I went, oh, that alley is for where Bayard and Elias have that first kiss. Okay, so I was ahead of myself, even though I wasn't quite there yet. But the thing is that people, it's that the city lets you know where you belong and where you don't belong. And these people, and so the black folks and the gay folks were ending up, they weren't on the main thoroughfares where Sammy Davis Jr. was performing on Broadway or acting in his film. They were off to the sides, so that therefore when coming to the March on Washington, he comes to D.C. in the film 3 times. The first 2 times to receive opposition from the forces that be. And then the 3rd time is when 250,000 people show up from all over the country. And to me, it's a transition from living in the shadows to claiming the street and claiming the daylight as your own. And that was sort of the visual journey that I wanted to take the audience on, as is the journey that the characters go through. That it's Bayard claiming all of his space. It's black people claiming all of their space. It's we don't. There's no done with the cowering, done with all of that. We are now in and we're now in D.C., which was a segregated city at that time. And it was also a swamp, as I learned filming in 120-degree weather down there. So, and that first scene, one of the first scenes where he and Martin are arguing about the grits, one of the location guys said, "Oh, this place was segregated back then." Mm. It's so fascinating. And so we just came in and claimed that place as well. It's about who owns the streets. We own the streets. Everybody owns the streets,
So then, I'm fascinated by the way you're talking about Bayard and the way you were shooting this movie, which makes me think, this isn't the typical civil rights movie. One of the reasons is what I talked about at the beginning of this conversation, where we see these giants that we've read about in history books. Some folks in this audience may have even met some of the folks who are portrayed on the screen. And what we read in history, they're on pedestals. They're perfect. Well, not perfect, but historically speaking, we read about them in their perfect phrases, in their perfect sentences, and there are no blemishes in their character or career. And we see it all, the competitiveness, the pettiness, the willingness to throw people under the bus and throw the movement under the bus because of just sheer ego. Talk about the tone of this film and why it was important. You might have to repeat yourself from the beginning, but now that everyone has seen all of the scenes, why it was important to show these folks as human beings?
Because they were, because it's about a process. We're all in process people. And in that first scene, Martin, betrays his friend. He does that. They were like brothers, but he was also an incredibly young man. And so he made a mistake. And then by the end of the film, he more than redeems himself. He forgives himself. Bayard forgives him. Their bond is tighter than ever at the end. I don't want to give away too much, but it's lots of discussions about history, and painting over the blemishes. The blemishes is how we figure out how to be better people. That makes me feel uncomfortable. It should make you feel uncomfortable. And then you should confront why you do feel uncomfortable, and then you'll figure out what you can do about it. And if you don't feel uncomfortable, you don't grow as a human being. It's just simple. Ella Baker corners Bayard. And I said, at one point says, forgive him, enough. Get over it. He made a mistake. Go get your friend. And Bayard rises to the occasion. That's what happens. People who are wiser than us, or people who have a perspective that we don't have, say something to us that give us the courage to go on the journey, and we figure out how to do what we do better. And if the person is already perfect, where's the journey? Where's the growth? Where's the discovery? And therefore, where's the belief that, oh, if they can get better, I can get better. I can get smarter. I can get more courage. I can be tougher. I can be clearer. I can be wittier. I can be, I can go off. I was going to say something else like, fuck you, but I did. I'm saying, but that's what I think is so important. It's just you see people become better versions of themselves. And that's so that's deeply, deeply important to me. In Hamlet, there are dead bodies all over the space. And then Fortinbras says, and we must go forward. And that's what a society must do. This blood, all this sin has been committed. We must go forward. We must go forward. Martin Luther King at the end, delivers this, one of the greatest oratory pieces ever. And there's a moment in the film where where right afterwards, there's a connection between him and Bayard, in essence saying, because Bayard has helped in many respects to help to deliver him to this extraordinary position. So it's about growth, and it's about journey, and it's about human frailty and human strength and wonder and brilliance. It's about all of that. And if you don't show the incompleteness, and at one point, Roy Wilkins, said in life worse things about Bayard. But at one point in the film, he says, I'm in it. But then everybody comes, not everybody, but they come out on the other side of it because they understand the smallness of their gripes and their ego crap, and whatever else is going on is unnecessary compared to the monumental task of Bayard says, Bayard, there's one line where he says, I'm going to get this wrong, we are committed to the task of making America better. That's what's on the line, nothing less. And so that's what they're all, and in their own way. Adam Clayton Powell passed so much legislature. He had an issue. He had jealous of MLK, but he did a phenomenal job as a congressman. Did a phenomenal job. He also did complicated things, but he did a phenomenal job. And so it's all those complications that I think that make for a really great drama, and also it's a reflective of who we are as people. Mm-hmm. We fail, and then we soar, and then we fail again, and hopefully we soar again. And that's the journey. And that's where drama is. We soar. That's a marble. thing. I don't know about that. I don't know what that is. God bless them. But we soar, we fail, we figure it out, we don't figure it out, we get brave, we get scared. A better version of ourselves emerges that we didn't even know was there. Boom.
So about 3 minutes ago, I got the 5-minute sign that I can't let you go and without asking you this last question, because in all the scenes, not only did we see phenomenal acting, but the music.
Branford Marcellus.
The music was also incredible. And music and the civil rights movement are intertwined.
Absolutely.
Talk about how you intertwine music of Branford Marsalis and Rustin.
Well, it's when you hear that music in that first scene that you hear, I think you instantly know New York. New York, early '60s. You instantly hear it. And I had this feeling that I wanted to have a quartet, a jazz quartet, and then the actors would be like the soloist. So they would take a solo. Bayard takes a solo while the music is hurling them forward. So I wanted music to be this incredibly active thing, because music was music. The songs. There was a score. There was a score that went along with the civil rights movement. But I wanted it to feel joyful and defiant and unique and original. And I remember at one point I had a conversation with Branford, and I said, I want this to sound like, this smart, hip, on the edge. They're not quite commercial, but they're very successful, blah, 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 blah. And he said, okay. And then about an hour later, he sent me like 12 versions of who was happening in 1963. So in addition to being this brilliant composer, he's an astonishing musicologist. And and then that energy would just feed me, and it would feed everybody. So, and so it was just so crucial. And also, there's empowerment in the singing. There's empowerment in the singing. There's empowerment in the voice. As the film goes on, later on, you see more and more of that as well.
I'm going to use your words back at you. You talked about music being joyful, defiant, which basically describes the great movie you've directed, Rustin. And for all of you, we're going to present you an early look at the unreleased trailer of Rustin. Please, no recording, as this will not debut until the end of this month. It is being timed for the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. The trailer of Rustin. George. And just think, they haven't seen the whole movie, and you got a standing ovation. Ladies and gentlemen, I left out one thing. I mentioned that this is Higher Ground Productions, but this is Higher Ground Productions' first narrative feature. And as you know, Higher Ground was founded by former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. So on that note, thank you for coming to this conversation about the movie Rustin, directed by the great George C. Wolfe.